some modified conditions, and I'll go through those in my report, in my presentation. Then the other thing is the email that went back and forth about Terry's, or maybe we are. We haven't started the meeting yet.
Okay.
Meeting, or the email is about Terry's concerns with the lack of escape lane for Chick-fil-A. I forwarded it to you, but I told Terry everybody would have a hard copy at the meeting.
Good evening. Call the meeting to order for the City of Walker Planning Commission.
Yep.
First item on the agenda is the review of the meeting minutes from June 15 and June 20, 2022. Any comments, questions, corrections? Motion?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Scott, to approve the minutes of June 15 and June 20, 2022. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. At this point, this is an opportunity for general public comment. If you have a comment on a non-agenda item, this is an opportunity to come forward and share that with the commission. No takers? Okay. We'll move on to the agenda items. First case is case number 22-017, site plan review for proposed Chick-fil-A restaurant. And we'll look to Planning Director Tricia Anderson to introduce the project.
Thanks, Terry. So we have another Chick-fil-A that wants to be in the city of Walker. This one is proposed at 3461 Alpine Avenue Northwest. And the action requested by the Planning Commission tonight is to review the site plan for a 5,000 square foot restaurant and associated drive-through for the Chick-fil-A, and to grant approval with or without conditions, tabling or denial of the request. This is a site plan review. The lot size is approximately 2 acres. The zoning district is C4, and the future land use is retrofit mixed use. And this site is at the northwest corner of Alpine Avenue and Old Orchard Drive. And we have Leslie Accardo from PEA Group tonight on behalf of Chick-fil-A. So just a quick background for you on this site. You have probably assumed that it was at one time probably a farm. So in 1970, the house and barn were demolished. In 73, Keller Ford took over the property and they built a new structure for a car sales lot there. And they made some upgrades in 2002 where they demolished that old structure and built a new one for the used car sales office. And then all of Keller Ford is now on the other side of Old Orchard Drive, and Golden Corral bought the site in 2009 and demolished that used car sales building for the Golden Corral restaurant. And so here we are, 2022, Chick-fil-A proposes to demolish the Golden Corral building for a new drive-through restaurant. I found it interesting that there was so many demolitions of buildings for a new use. A lot of times we see reuse of an existing building, but not necessarily with this site. So just a quick snapshot of the site plan. You can see that the site itself, situated on Alpine Avenue and Old Orchard. No curb cuts on Alpine Avenue. Those were closed off a long time ago. And they have a very large parking area and a very large area for stacking, and we'll get into that more in just a minute. So the proposed improvements for the site, like I said, a 5,000 square foot restaurant. They'll have an outdoor patio, double drive-through lane with 70 stacking spaces. They have space for 84 standard parking spaces. They'll have an order canopy, just like the one in Standale. Your typical landscaping and lighting. And they're also proposing to close off the easternmost driveway on Old Orchard Drive. So just a few highlights from my report, we've been working with the folks who have been working on behalf of Chick-fil-A for kind of a really long time. And so we've worked with them on a preliminary site plan a really long time ago. I feel like they're really thorough in wanting to know what our codes are, and they, it seems like they do a lot to try to meet all of our codes the way they're written. But Chick-fil-A does have their own kind of thing in some circumstances. And so one of those things is site circulation. So I think the site is set up generally like the one in Standale. This one is just a little bit different because it has a lot more room for stacking. And so when you look at the site circulation on this particular site, you have a main entrance from Old Orchard Drive. You've got space for 70 vehicles. That's a lot, but that's a lot at, its busiest moment. On Alpine, could I see that many cars stacked up? Maybe during Christmas time. But I guess we'll find out, right? There's one opportunity to exit the drive-through lane, and that is about 13 spaces in after you've committed in the drive-through, and then if you decide you want to get out, you can exit back into the parking lot. There's no other opportunities to exit unless one lane is reserved for exit during slower times. So when we had the site plan review committee meeting, we talked a lot about how the existing site in Standale is functioning. And we, as far as we know, we haven't had too many issues. And, the impression that I got from Justin Lurk, who is representing Chick-fil-A, is that they have management on site, and the folks that are employed for Chick-fil-A, they manage the drive-through traffic based on the volume that's coming in. So if they're able to close off one of the lanes and keep most of the traffic going through the one drive-through lane, so that if there does need to be an escape, they can do that on the second drive-through lane. And so the email that I was just talking about before the meeting started was from Justin, kind of giving a narrative of how the operational logistics work on site. And so it's my understanding that they have workers there that are managing those traffic flows, and they make modifications to the drive-through based on how much the site. I'm just going to go back to the site plan really quick here. Oop. So you're entering the site, and probably more often than not, you're not going to have both lanes full of cars. But like I just mentioned, it's possible because there's enough room on the site, and apparently people really like Chick-fil-A, so there's potential for that. One of the things that Scott and I try to get behind is creating a legit opportunity for escaping out of the drive-through. Particularly when you get in here, maybe you've ordered and you're waiting to receive your food, and so there's not really an opportunity to get out if both drive-through lanes are slam packed, right? So Terry had the question of how long does it actually take between when you order your food and you actually receive your food and you get on out of the drive-through. Sounds like Justin said something like 120 seconds. But if you're this guy way back here, it might be a really long time until you actually get out of the drive-through. So I think there's a lot of variables here, and they're all kind of somewhat dependent on each other. So at one point in time, I think at site plan review committee meeting, we had talked about having this exit that Chick-fil-A has closed off onto Old Orchard Drive and have that serve as a exit only, just another opportunity for an escape. And so obviously the plan came back without that. And while we don't have an ordinance that requires it, the Planning Commission's got to feel satisfied or comfortable with their on-site management of traffic flow through their drive-through. And so that was kind of the purpose of that last-minute narrative from Justin. So let me go back to. So that's kind of how the site circulation is going to work. The site circulation ties into the site access. I included a map in your packet that shows how much access this site really has. So there's one access off Old Orchard. There's a signal here, which makes it even better for, if there's high volumes that are exiting the site. There's also 2 entrances on 4 Mile and 2 on Alpine Avenue, and there's cross access throughout the High Point Shopping Center. There's a cross access drive here that connects over into this parking lot. So all of these drives are two-way traffic. So redundancy and, being able to get to the site without having to come in here with the potential for stacking to go out on Old Orchard, that would be a lot of cars. I don't think you're gonna see that. So, I think when there's a use that has such a high volume of traffic going in and out of the site, I think it's always important to have redundancy. And so, right from the get-go, we kind of thought, wow, this is a pretty good location for something like a Chick-fil-A. And then the other thing I want to highlight is the landscaping. Obviously, the site has been used by other occupants over the years, and the Golden Corral site, when that went in 2009, they were subject to site plan approval, and they had requirements for landscaping, and a lot of that stuff is still alive and doing well. So primarily the trees along this stretch of Old Orchard Drive, they're trying to preserve and protect, so they won't be proposing any new plantings here, but the rest of the site they'll be dressing up with a lot more trees, shrubs, and landscaped islands, which is something that they don't have now. Those landscape islands are also going to come in handy with any light poles that are existing in the parking lot. And so, just make sure I covered everything. Yeah, I don't have a ton of comments other than the site circulation and, the lack of a bypass lane. So, hopefully the information that was provided kind of last minute today gives the Planning Commission a little bit of a better comfort level with the amount of traffic that has the potential to enter the site and leave the site without that escape lane, and with the workers there being able to manage the logistics of the drive-through traffic. So I am recommending approval subject to the conditions. I won't go through all of these. They're all pretty standard. And I assume you'll read these into the record when you make your motion.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Any questions at this juncture? Okay. We'll move to City Engineer Scott Connors.
Really just 2 items from us. The first one is that the driveway that's going to be removed on Old Orchard, which we think is a great proposal to get that further away from the traffic signal. We want to make sure that they do not get out into the lanes with that pavement repair. If they do, that falls into a new criteria with us where they have to go all the way to the lane line. So it ends up being a much bigger patch. So our hope is that they can work with the DPW to limit that to just the curb, and I think they can. But if that doesn't work out, they'll be, again, out in the road all the way to the lane line, which is more money for them more joints there for us. The second item is related to the circulation around the site and the stacking, and Tricia really got into detail on that, so I don't want to belabor it too much, but you know, we have made sure from an engineering standpoint that to let you know that we're not super comfortable with this. We've looked at 2 or 3 Chick-fil-A's now. One of them's been built, and we've been told things like, don't stand in the way of my chicken biscuit, and get in line with the team. And I think it's safe to say we just want to make sure that we're pointing it out to you as a concern. We don't have a policy in place for this. We have a practice in place for this, and so we've secured it every other place except for the last Chick-fil-A. So it's really just a point of discussion for the commission. And I think to clarify a couple of the details on that, I noticed that there's at least over 60 cars in the drive-through, but that some of them in that left lane do have an emergency out, and in the right lane you do not have an emergency out. And so we talked about some different ways that maybe that could be achieved. I don't think any of them were great solutions. I think the best solution is to have a whole nother lane around there for people to be able to bail out. And so what you've got is about 40 cars after that initial left turn lane bailout, and all of those are going to be then committed for the duration, no matter how long it takes. So that's it for us.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Do we know if there's a cross-access agreement in place already with where Outback is there?
It's there. I mean,
You showed that on one of your slides.
I've used it a lot, but
You showed that on one of your slides. This one? Yes.
Does that pertain to the entire length of the property or just right there?
So the cross-access easement is to this parcel. So the cross-access easement that's recorded, and there's a library and page reference in here, for access off Old Orchard Drive to go through this site to access the High Point Shopping Center. So it's a reciprocal cross-access easement. But it's probably something that we need to maybe take a look at to know exactly what the language says. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
And maybe Leslie has more detail on that.
Yeah, I think Jason, in particular, as I looked at that, the cross-access across the front of Outback Steakhouse is one where they've got parking along the building, and then they've got parking against the street, and that cross-access easement goes right between the two. How likely people will take that route, it'll probably be dependent upon just their experience as they move through that area. But
I think people that frequent Alpine Avenue know all the tricks
oh yeah,
of crossing onto other properties without having to go onto Alpine Avenue.
November and December, I don't even get on Alpine Avenue. It's all through the back.
So, if there's no other comments, questions, we can have the applicant come forward and give us your name and address, please, and hit the button in the middle. There you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay, or do I need to? I'm short, so. Leslie Accardo. I'm representing Chick-fil-A this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to appear before you this evening. Any specific, you want to know more about the cross-access? I just know that it is part of the property, and that they're fully expecting it to remain completely open.
All right. In terms of, you're familiar with what was sent to the Planning Commission this afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. In there, one of the things, from my standpoint, that would be important to know is just how long it takes for each one of these transactions. And the only information in there that speaks to that closely is a goal of going from point A to the pick up your food in 120 seconds.
So the email was going around earlier, so I decided to stop by the other location that was in Walker, and I went through there about 5:15 this evening. I was in line for 4 minutes. I had a chicken sandwich and waffle fries, so not a huge order.
Yep.
But I think one of the interesting things is how involved the operators are in making sure they're working effectively. So when I actually pulled in, they had you actually pull in one lane. It's spread out to 2 to take the orders. It's spread back down to 1 for the meal delivery. So even doing that gyration, so to speak, that I was still only in line for 4 minutes. And I think that's the great thing about the flexibility of the dual flex lane, that's what they call it, is the ability to bypass, if you do have something going on, there are people out there, there's people taking orders, there are people delivering the food, so there is that opportunity for them to move. They have like magnetic cones basically that they can just quickly pull aside, so someone could leave that way. I guess the other thing that is good to note is that typically in traffic studies that we've done across the various Chick-fil-A's in Michigan, the most cars typically in a drive-through lane at peak times is 35 cars. So even if, I think having 70, that's gonna be Christmas, right? We're not expecting that type of volume, or often you might see a little bit more during the honeymoon period, where you'll have a little bit more traffic going on as, people get their Chick-fil-A fix. But typically it's about 35 cars at peak times. So
Okay.
at that point, you would be, that one escape lane would be open.
Well, even at 35 cars, if you're looking for a goal of 120 seconds from the order to picking up your food, that would suggest maybe 70 minutes to get everybody through?
Oh, no, it should be that
No?
long, no. No, not, per car, no, because especially at peak times, they've got the 2 lanes going, and they've got people ordering food and delivering food, so it's, those 2 lanes are working almost simultaneously.
Whether you're, I don't know if you can talk to this, but as far as representations made by Chick-fil-A, do they provide like the narrative? Is it typical to have a narrative describing how it goes?
No, it's something we could definitely provide something like that. But this is something they've been working out in all their different locations, and it's working really well. And so, we could certainly provide something in more detail, but the idea really is for it to be flexible. And the owner-operator of that Chick-fil-A, it's in their best interest to make sure things are functioning well, because that's their sole source of income. So if people get frustrated because they can't get through quickly, or, they're stuck, that's not gonna be a good thing for them in the overall big picture.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, no, to your point on the 2-minute thing, I think that the way that you're calculating is a little bit different than the way I'm thinking it through in my head, because your point is that the 2 minutes from that point A to the pickup of the order, so in that 2 minutes, everyone ahead of them would also proceed through the drive-through as well.
It's not 2 minutes each.
2 minutes per customer,
It's congruous.
Yeah.
Congruent. Sorry, big words today.
Yeah. So you probably, based on the size of the line where that stands, you're looking at 6 minutes through that whole line, and that's, I'm guessing, assuming it's just a one stacked line, but I think that's probably more the number that they're targeting. Now, whether or not they can achieve that at times is different, but just for a little bit of clarity on it, because I see how you got there too.
My experience, I've gone to Standale more than I should. Never been a problem. This has one more out than Standale. Standale has none. But once you get to the order panel, they usually form one line, and then there's an out immediately. So you're talking, if there's I think Scott said 40 double lane and 20 cars ahead of you. If there's 20 cars not in there, you can get out fast. I go back to the same argument I had when we talked about Standale. We don't have it in the ordinance. And I told staff back then, fix it. Otherwise, enforcing something that's not in the ordinance when they do already have 2 lanes. So, and 1 out. So my opinion has changed little since last time, and I haven't seen the problem. I did see the problems at M6 and Kalamazoo when they went in. I was stuck in the road in line there. So, but I haven't seen the problem in Standale. I think this lot is very big comparatively. So, I mean, I don't see it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
Oh, ma'am, have you told Golden Corral yet?
I don't know.
They may be surprised.
yeah, and I'll just build on Tyler's point that I mean, I think this lot is about as good a spot as you can find along Alpine Avenue for the Chick-fil-A. I mean, looking at all the understanding the challenges with access, because I used to, so when that Chick-fil-A opened up, I was carpooling off of M6, and I remember seeing traffic spilled out onto the highway from that Chick-fil-A. So knowing the challenges of how that can become at times, and of course that was like the novelty of the first West Michigan Chick-fil-A and all that. But I guess having that understanding, I think this is about as good a location as you can find for the types of traffic that it can attract, and I feel pretty good about what we see in front of us.
Okay.
So I'll explain my comment earlier, and one of the things that I've been kind of going back and forth with Tyler a little bit about it was, I understand that there's the one outlet. My concern would be is if you get midway into that and a car starts on fire or something and you need to get other cars out of the way. And I'll go both directions with this. So in that particular case, you could see an owner-operator that essentially, gets his staff to, okay, forget about the food, let's just start funneling people out, and you could clear it out pretty fast, almost like a go-kart track, right? How they stack and then get people out. So I think there could be some policies in place with them that could make it work. The only thing that I would say is there is probably an opportunity on that lane. If you look at this drawing that's up now, kind of where that 40 is in that upper right-hand corner, could there be an out right there that goes into the Outback parking lot? So then that way you have an out on the left-hand side, and then you also have an out on the right-hand side. It's probably not the ideal spot because people have probably ordered at that stage in the game. So that would be kind of an operational type of thing. I'm just wondering if that was looked at and or considered, and I don't know, Scott, if you guys had looked at that side of it. It looks to be like about a 3-foot kind of height difference between the two. It would be a way to make it kind of work.
Yeah, like I said with my presentation, my brief presentation, we're just throwing it out there for discussion, trying not to make too many operational observations as a consumer, because it's awful easy to do. I travel through these all the time, all around the Midwest, and I try to just put my blinders on, make my decisions as a baseball dad, not as an engineer.
Yeah, and I remember when the Standale one opened, that first couple months, obviously they had some learning to do to kind of figure out what they were doing, but there was definitely people that were an hour-long wait, for out, and they've got it moving, at this point. But that would be my only concern, is that if something happened where you needed to get the vehicles out quick, either there was something in place or you would have some other way of accessing or getting out of there. And I think by that number 40, that's on there, you could make that work. But I understand Tyler's point too. So otherwise, I'm in favor of the project, and I think they've done a really nice job with everything else. And you know, the issues that Chick-fil-A has in terms of a lot of stacking. They've obviously, you know, got a much better plan here than other locations.
Well, anybody else have comments on it? I see what you're saying. I think this is the good location for it. And as far as providing sufficient stacking on site so it doesn't go back on a public street, it looks like it's scores very well there. And the fact that there is that allowance for turning out on that inside lane back into the main field west of the building, that's definitely a plus. It's just hard to, that circumstance where there is something that goes wrong with the vehicle, it may not blow up, it just may die right there, and it can't move it at all. That can happen, and trying to deal with that circumstance. Now, it sounded like on the initial plan, and perhaps you're familiar with, worked with the initial plan where there was a thought of that using that current driveway, generally speaking, that location as an emergency exit. How did that discussion go?
Unfortunately, we have some grading issues. So once we're dealing with an underground detention area that's just opposite of that. So with all the different things going on with the drive-through canopy and the underground detention, trying to get the grade to work in order to let someone escape that way. And I guess I would also say the police department wasn't really in favor of that option either. So that was something that we had discussed during the meeting, and they were not in favor of that option.
Okay. All right. Again, that's just one aspect of this. Any other comments, questions concerning the plan that's been submitted and what's proposed? Pat?
I like the plan. I mean, again, it's a perfect lot. It's got plenty of space. I mean, this is not the first Chick-fil-A that's being built. It's not the largest Chick-fil-A, so they've got a lot of history on what's good and what's not good, and we're offering our advice. My only concern is that corner. And I know, because right now the traffic study is showing like a right, a left, and a straight ahead, and then we got the incoming. But I don't know if that lane can handle 4 lanes. I mean, that's just something that can really stack up, and those lights have to be readjusted, because you can get quite a stack up between Old Orchard and 4 Mile. And as we all know, Christmas time is going to be a standstill. But that'd be my only concern about this whole project, is just that intersection right there, because people are going to come out that intersection. You have your cross easement going to 4 Mile, but a lot of people don't know about that, and a lot of people aren't going to do that. You might get 20% going through there, but it's still going to be 80% coming back out onto Old Orchard, is my opinion. So, and again, that's just something Walker and the state of Michigan, because Alpine's a highway, so we got to get that all ironed out when it's all said and done.
Pat brings up a good point. You know, they may go left turn or straight across, or they may go, I don't know what, it's 3 lanes wide right now. There may be room for 4 lanes. I don't know, that would be up to engineering. I think with a couple good signs pointing exit to Alpine and exit to 4 Mile might help people that don't know that. That's just a suggestion. So that, I mean, if I can get out to 4 Mile rather than Alpine, yeah. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, just because if you have somebody going straight across from Old Orchard across to go to Best Buy, and they sit there waiting for the light to turn, you have 30 cars behind you trying to take a right to go on Alpine, and you're all sitting there waiting, and then all of a sudden, you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's all. Just a concern, we all know Alpine.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to the exit out. Is that, I'm in favor either way. But is that something where, Scott, you would have an opinion on if they were to bring you a plan that would show that exit out, you know, kind of up in that upper right-hand corner, that you guys would be okay with a scenario like that? Does that help achieve closer?
At staff level, we looked at the lower right corner a little bit more. And wasn't really in love with that idea either, but we were grasping at straws to try to find a compromise. And, you know, I think Chick-fil-A is pretty confident in what they're doing, as Pat said. And, you know, we're, in some senses, little low walkers, so.
So if they came to you and said, yeah, we'd be interested in this, you'd at least take a look at it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Because I think our practice has been to try to make sure there was circulation around the exterior of the drive-through lanes. So in order to do that, we would listen to any comment, any proposal.
Well, I'll just say, being a little bit of a redneck, I have an emergency in there, their curbs don't matter. So, I mean, if you have a true emergency and have to get out of line, there's always over the curb. That's just what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that, but they're, you know, people, especially people like me, so. Yeah.
Scott, any,
No, I mean, I'm generally in favor of the project. I don't have a lot to add for what's already been stated, so I don't need to belabor it, but generally I'm in favor.
okay, thank you. Mark? I'd be in favor. Joe?
I like Jason's idea, your staff has a emergency, somebody pulls a button or something and everybody gets out of the way. I thought that was the most practical thing I've heard. Yeah, I'm
Well,
in
and I
favor
think-
of it too.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point because there are people outside taking orders. So if something was happening, they are able to respond right away. They have headsets that call into the kitchen. They're able to call a manager. They're able to call the other people that are delivering food. So if there was an emergency, they could react quickly.
Well, that begs the question whether or not Chick-fil-A would be willing to kind of lay out a plan to show how that would be addressed.
Okay.
So that becomes their operating manual for this particular location. Because I think that the comments we've gotten from Chick-fil-A is that each franchise is its own owner and operator, and in this case, I think there's some good points have been raised as far as some advantages of this site and also some of the shortcomings. And if operationally they can lay out so that no matter who's out there, they've got some directions as far to how to deal with that type of circumstance.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure we can provide something like that.
I can read that in too, so.
All right, any other conversation? Do we have anyone ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Case number 22-017, 3461 Alpine Avenue Northwest, Chick-fil-A Alpine. I make a motion to approve the site plan for the 5,000 square foot drive-through restaurant and related site improvements for Chick-fil-A in accordance with the plan set last revision dated 6/15/2022, located at 3461 Alpine Avenue Northwest, subject to the following conditions. Number one, the applicant shall address all items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 6/30/22. Number two, the applicant shall revise the photometric plan to bring illumination levels to 0-foot candles at south and west property lines for review and approval by staff prior to the issuance of building permit. Three, any changes to the approved landscape plan shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to building occupancy. Number four, the applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineering plans incorporating the recommended conditions of the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. Number five, the applicant may be required to provide financial guarantee in the form of a letter of credit or cash escrow deposit to ensure the quality completion of site-related items such as landscaping at the time of building permit issues. Number six, the applicant shall provide to staff an emergency plan for emergencies in the drive-through lanes. I don't know how else to, it doesn't have to be huge, but just something that says, here's what will happen if there is an emergency in the drive-through lanes. Here's our plan.
How about an operational procedure?
Operational procedure. There's a professional word. And that's it.
Support.
Okay, we have by Steve to approve the project with the conditions just noted. Any other comments? Not. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right, next case is case number 2-016. This is a public hearing, final area site plan review for Tidal Wave Car Wash, and look to City Planner Tricia Anderson to introduce the project.
Thank you, Terry. So we have, as you said, a final area site plan in front of you tonight for a 3,620 square foot tunnel car wash facility for Tidal Wave, and for you to grant approval with or without conditions, tabling, or denial of the request. So again, it's final area site plan review. The address of the subject site is 248 Wilson, and the lot size is approximately 1.58 acres. The zoning district is CPUD. It's within the Westtown PUD. Future land use is mixed use, and community character is neighborhood node. General location of the site is lot C6 and C7 of the Westtown CPUD, and that's at the northeast corner of the Westtown Service Drive and Wilson Avenue. And we have Kayleigh Bevington with us tonight on behalf of the applicant, and she's with Bohler Engineering. Just a little bit of background before I get into the site plan stuff. The site that the car wash is being proposed on is the last remaining site in the Westtown CPUD. And it should also be noted that the Westtown Service Drive kind of cuts through a little portion of this lot, creating a little bit of a challenge when designing a site. And then the background on Tidal Wave that I can give you, that I gathered from their website, is that they're a Georgia-based company, and they have a lot of locations throughout the southeast states in the U.S. They've got a couple up-and-coming sites in some of the northern states, and then they have a couple established sites sort of in the Midwest. As far as I know, this is the first one that's being proposed in Michigan, and they specialize in fast tunnel car wash facilities and associated amenities like vacuum and self-serve vacuum stations. So for this particular site, the proposed improvements include the car wash tunnel building. They're proposing a double lane pay kiosk, 24 vacuum stalls, and an associated kiosk with some type of vending there. 3 parking spaces, which includes 2 ADA spaces, masonry dumpster enclosure, site lighting and landscaping. They're also proposing a ground mount sign, and as far as stacking goes, they've got space for total of 17 car wash stacking spaces, and that includes before and after the pay kiosk. So I overlaid the top of the aerial photo so you could get a good idea of what's being proposed and sort of the layout in terms of what's already here in relation to the Westtown Service Drive. These are the stacking spaces that are proposed before the pay kiosk, and there's spaces for 2 at the kiosk, and then there's more spaces as you go through the car wash. So before I get into more site-related stuff, I should bring up a couple points about the land use itself. So if this were a C1 zoning district, this would be a special exception use in the C1 zoning district, and there's a setback from residential for the vacuums, which I think is 100 feet in the C1, under the special, the additional standards for car washes. And so obviously that's because vacuums make noise. Another thing that we discovered from the last time we had a car wash come to the Planning Commission is that also the tunnel itself and the dryers also generate a lot of noise, and in some circumstances more noise than the vacuums. And so when we look at the land use in relation to the adjacent residential, we want to make sure that there's not going to be any negative impacts on the residential. And so when it comes to this case, the vacuums look to be about 230 feet from the pool, the Westtown Apartments pool. And then from the nearest building from the property line is 133 feet. I didn't measure right to the vacuums for that one. So one of the things that I asked for them to provide is some kind of study on the noise generation that comes from the car wash itself and the vacuums. And so they did provide us with a study that was conducted in 2017, giving us sound measurements that were taken at various distances from the vacuums. Variables are probably a little different with the site that was sampled compared to this site, but I think in a general sense, it kind of gives you an idea of how loud these vacuums are. And one thing that I should bring up when it comes to this particular site is that you've got trucks going down Wilson and Lake Michigan Drive that are probably generating an equal amount of noise. And there's no restriction on loud vehicles driving down Wilson. And so if you look at the different sound levels and what they would measure in terms of A-weighted decibels, I included this other noise source comparison from that other study that we got, but it was taken from the same source, so I felt it was okay to include. One of the noises in here was like a car or like a truck. Maybe it was in the one that they actually provided, but it was a large truck moving at 55 miles per hour at 50 feet away. The sound levels that are generated from their vacuums are comparable to that. So, when we first met with the folks from Bohler who were representing Tidal Wave, we originally kind of advised them that the use might not be a good fit. But after we've been able to do a significant amount of analysis on the car wash and the surrounding land uses and some of the acoustic studies that have come into play, that's not as concerning as some of the other site-related issues that we've encountered on the site. So the main things that I want to bring to your attention regarding the site design have mostly relate to vehicle circulation, the way that the site's designed. So they're showing one standard parking space and 2 ADA parking spaces, but they also show that they have 3 employees. So it's not really clear if all 3 employees will take up all 3 spaces, including the ADA spaces, even if they're not needing those accommodations. And so that should definitely be clarified. And, if I'm gonna jump down to site circulation with the employee parking, the way that the site is designed with 2 points of egress after you get through the tunnel to go out onto the Westtown Service Drive, employees and delivery trucks or garbage trucks or any any vehicles that need to come into the site, maybe there's a service truck that has to come in and work on, an electrical issue with the vacuums or whatever. They have to enter through exit only points from the site to go into the main part of the site without having to go in through the actual car wash. And so that's, in my opinion, that's kind of one of the biggest flaws with the site here. So we'll also have one-way entrance into the tunnel in the pay lanes. Two egress-only drive approaches from the site. And so I feel like that could be modified so that you aren't going to run into those issues. The other thing that is also kind of a major flaw with the design is the vehicle stacking. So the plan shows space for 17 stacked vehicles, 6 of which are shown before the pay kiosk, with 2 at the pay kiosk. On a sunny, busy day over in Westtown, in early spring, when it starts getting nice out, people are like, I'm gonna go wash my car. What we don't want is vehicles stacking out into the street. So we kind of mentioned during our site plan review committee meeting a couple of different alternatives to the design that could prevent some stacking out into the street. But the site plan that we received that's before you, I don't think took a lot of those suggestions into consideration. There were some changes that we did see, so the applicant did make some modifications in relation to some of the concerns that we expressed at site plan review committee meeting. But I feel like the site design and the circulation is enough to warrant the planning commission choosing to table any action on this item tonight. And so that is my recommendation, that the planning commission table any action until the applicant can explore some more design configurations to mitigate our concerns with stacking, circulation, and parking. And it may just be to have to reduce the number of vacuum spaces. But we're not in the business of designing sites for people. And so I would like to give the applicant more time to work on that, and that's why I'm recommending tabling.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Any comments or questions for Tricia at this point? Okay. Over to City Engineer Scott Connors.
I've got a little bit of a longer list, but I feel like if you're going to be considering tabling, I might want to just walk through that and take the time to do that, so I'm going to do that. The first item is related to cross-access. On sheet C201, I believe it shows all the easements for the site, and we had a really hard time trying to differentiate between the different easements. In a black and white drawing, that's very difficult. On a computer screen, they're in multiple colors, it's easy to see. And in our case, we couldn't locate the cross-access easement, and we think that's probably the most critical easement of all on this development, because that private ring road is the lifeline for all of those businesses. So we got to make sure that that's in place. So if we found out that it was not in place, we would want to see a condition requiring that that be recorded and documented. The next item we came up with is one you're hearing more and more about as we see so much development in Standale. It's the Standale sidewalk section that we have. It's a 6 foot wide instead of 5 foot wide. It's got a 3 by 3 kind of pattern to it, some special tooling. And if we don't put that detail on the plans, or if the developers don't, we're going to have mistakes. And so we want to make sure that it's very, very clear. We give people that detail and tell them to put it on the plan. And if this was to move forward, we want to make sure that's on the plan. Related to the entrance to the site, Tricia mentioned there's only one way into the site, and that's through the car wash kiosk at the north end. So if you're an employee, so if you're a visitor, you're a supplier, garbage man, anything, technically that's the only way in. Otherwise, you have to use an exit and go in the out as a way to get into the site. So we think that there's some circulation issues there that could use a little bit more help. And then related to parking, Tricia mentioned that there's 3 parking spots. I guess I'd argue that there's really just 1 parking spot, because unless you're unless you're only targeting employees that have the ability to use the spots for individuals with disabilities, there's only 1 spot available. So there really needs to be more spots than that, unless we're missing something from an engineering side here. I would recommend that some of those vacuum spaces be removed and some parking be installed there. And if you go and look at any of the car washes in West Michigan, as Tricia mentioned, the northern regions, there's often 4 or 5 people working at one time to try to do different things and take your money and help with the pre-wash and all those kinds of things, not to mention managing all those people. And so we really need to make sure that we get that right. To the west of the building, you can see that the sidewalk has to make kind of an abrupt turn around a big obstruction there. And what that is a gas meter and valve. And so we didn't know if that was a DTE gas main or if it was an ANR pipeline, which we have both of those in this area. They're both quite big and something we want to point out. And in this case, the building is right up to the west property line, or very close. So we have contacted the gas company, and they have set up an internal meeting to work through that to see if they have any issues with how close that might be, because we did have some issues earlier in my tenure here about 10, 15 years ago, where somebody was working next to that gas main and the soils around the main were so loose that the gas main moved, and we had to take some emergency measures to keep that in place, and it was a very dangerous situation. So shame on us if we don't learn from that. So we certainly point that out here. There are 4 chambers towards the southeast part of that tunnel on the east side that are for water reclamation, so that they can recycle water from the site, pull it out, kind of decant it, clean it, and then put it back in. There's a note there that says designed by others. And what we want to do is make sure that if this moves forward, there's a condition that the plumbing inspector review and approve those. We don't want the plumbing inspector to say, oh, the city engineer reviewed and approved those, we're good to go, because there's not enough detail there. It's a plumbing detail that should be looked at in detail later. Also related to stormwater quality, they've got a contact water quality unit that is proposed on the site, and that might not mean much to you, but I'm sure you remember that the detention for this area is the big wetland in the middle of the facility. The ring road goes around it, and it was a really rare permit that we saw from Eagle to allow them to do stormwater detention inside of the wetland. And as part of that, rare frequency that we see that, we pledged to make sure that they put stormwater quality units in, and that they be inspected and maintained on a frequent basis. So we have to see something on the plan to kind of make sure that when the engineer's gone, that the owner knows that they have to take care of that and inspect it annually and do whatever needs to be done to take care of it. And then lastly, before I lose my voice, there is some of the storm sewer on the site is very flat. In fact, the stretch on the northern part of the site, as far as this plan goes at least, shows that it falls backwards. So we get a little bit concerned about that. I did reach out to the engineer that designed this site and oversaw the construction, and they said, yes, the pipe went in a little bit flat, but not that flat, and there's no sections where it works in reverse. So we've shared that information and tried to get that to the engineer. Hopefully they can take another look, because if it is running uphill, that's not good. And it means it's going to plug up, it's going to hold a lot of sediment, and that's going to take some extra attention. So kind of a long list, but I think those are all things that we'd want to see looked at in greater detail if this was tabled.
That's a pretty impressive list. I'm impressed with the details you have there.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Scott, maybe I'm missing something, but couldn't that north exit be made 30-foot wide and be an in and out?
Sure.
Then you could access, there's a lot of issues with this site. I agree.
Yeah, I think, but Tricia was clear about this too. We can't design the site for them.
Right.
Gave them some suggestions.
I was just wondering if I missed something, or it could be made into that. So, okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions for Scott? Okay. Let's see. We'll have have the applicant come forward, please, and identify yourself and any comments you want to add to the presentation.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kayleigh Bevington. I'm a project manager with Bohler, so I'm here on behalf of Tidal Wave. I guess I'll give you a little bit of an overview, and I'll try and answer some of the questions that I heard come up there, and then if it's okay with you guys, then I'll take any other additional questions. Tricia did a great job kind of summarizing Tidal Wave and their history. They are a Georgia-based company, started in Atlanta, Georgia around 2004. They expanded their footprint across the South with over, I think at this point, 100 operating locations across the South. And so now they're currently in the process of expanding into the Midwest and the Northeast. So my company in particular is helping them to develop sites in New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Delaware, that whole region there. And coincidentally, Leslie that was here before told me she's working on some sites in Iowa and Kansas. So obviously they're on a big push to develop across the North. So given that, they're obviously very experienced in the car wash market. They're considered one of the premier express auto spas. They refer to themselves companies. Let me see what else here. So their goal is always to design their sites and their buildings to be attractive additions to their community. They try to make the buildings look really nice, a lot of stone, a lot of glazing, a lot of window. Part of the reason the building is situated the way it is on the site is because that whole side facing that main highway is pretty much glazing or glass. So it's kind of a nice looking facility. You see the cars going through the tunnel. And obviously with the landscaping, it just ends up being a nice looking site. Getting into a little bit more technical information, a mature tidal wave site generates roughly 500 customers a day, which is actually a lower use than, like a lower demanding use than a quick serve restaurant, like a Starbucks or something like that. So operationally, Tidal Wave feels this is adequate stacking. The equipment that they use can handle more than 1,000 cars per day. So that's obviously like twice what they would expect to see a mature car wash have. So I did some quick math while I was sitting there. So at 500 cars a day, let's say they operate 8 to 8, which in the summer would be pretty typical for them. They really only operate during daylight hours, and then they would close during dark. So that would turn to 42 cars an hour or 3 cars every 5 minutes. And the way these tunnels work is, it's not like a bay car wash where you sit and then it moves around you and then you drive out. This is kind of a constant moving operation. Go back here. So the way their program works is a little bit different. A lot of their clients or customers have monthly memberships. That makes up about 65% of their customer base. So you pay some monthly fee and you're able to get so many washes or unlimited washes in a month or something like that. So that makes up most of their customers. And where that comes into play is it helps expedite payment. So that pay kiosk that you see on there, one is staffed and 2 has like a plate reader on it or a sticker reader. So customers that are members can just pull right through the kiosk and it scans the code and they move on their way. And then, like I said, there is a customer service person there should there be an issue at the kiosk. So that's kind of like my little tidal wave overview. To address kind of the major concerns real quick, the layout that you see here is very typical for tidal wave. And it is a little bit non-conventional. As an engineer, I will agree that's not normally what we would do, but they found that this is what works best for them operationally. The one entrance through the kiosk, through the car wash, with a bailout before the car wash if needed. They like to have 2 egress, and they find the more vacuums, the better. And I'm assuming that's because people hang out at the vacuums longer. People sit there, get the front seat, back seat, all those things. So they try and get as many vacuums as they can on their sites. The vacuums are free to all customers. So once you pay for a car wash, the vacuums are unlimited use at no additional cost. So as you can understand, as a business, they don't want to encourage people entering the vacuum side because then people might be coming and using the vacuums for free all the time. And that kind of goes against the setup of their business model. So that is the reason for the way the site circulation is set up. But definitely not like a conventional site. It's just the way that they make theirs work. What else? The parking. They allow employees to park in vacuum stalls, so they vacuums can function also as employee parking. That's pretty standard on all of their sites. All of the engineers' comments, Mr. Connors, we will happily address. We have no issues with any of the engineers' concerns. As far as the access easement is concerned, that was all based on an Alta survey. So my concern would be that maybe one never was recorded. So we could make that, we would be happy to have that condition as part of our approval. Water quality unit, that's fine with inspection. As he mentioned, that storm pipe he mentioned is an existing pipe, so that's not one that we're proposing. We're not proposing one flow backward. That was just however it was installed. That's what our surveyor picked up. And he might have, maybe the surveyor had a little bit of fluctuation if it really is truly that flat. So we did receive as-built drawings, and my engineers are looking at that currently to see if we can adjust the pipe calculations. I think that was all of the major concerns, but if I missed something, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, a couple. Was there any consideration in terms of the amount of employee parking spots?
Yeah, they allow employees to park in vacuum stalls.
Another one, on the elevation drawings, it would probably be A201. There indicates that there are overhead doors, 3 of them that would be along Wilson Avenue, and then 2 of them that would face towards the west town. Are those operational?
I don't know the answer. They're facing Wilson?
That's what it appears on the elevation drawings.
My guess would be they're operational, but probably only for maintenance. The entrance is, as you can see, is on the north side there, and the exit's on the south.
It'd be around 14, Tricia. So that drawing right there, there's 3 overhead doors there. Unless I have it oriented incorrectly, that would be the elevation facing Wilson.
I do not have an architectural answer for you on that one. I could certainly provide one once I speak with the architect, but my guess is that's a way for them to access equipment should they need to do maintenance. It would not be used for customers.
Jason, to me, that appears to be the side that's facing the Westtown Service Drive.
Well, scroll to A201. I would agree with you that that drawing shows it that way, because those would be by the dryers. But if you look at A201, which would be the exterior elevations, keep going up. No, 201. See, if you look at that middle one there, it would indicate that that would be along the Wilson Avenue, and then the one underneath it, which is considered the rear elevation, that has the building which faces the west town, and to the right of that building there are 2 overhead doors that would essentially be by the entry to the tunnel. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out what's going on there, if there would be a noise issue that would come out of those if they were open during operation. And then would there be any types of chemicals, spray, anything like that that would go out into Wilson or along that sidewalk?
I do not believe those would ever be open during operation. That wouldn't make sense from an operations standpoint.
It would be my guess that maybe this is a rendering for a different maybe a different setup. Like at it, you know, that would just be my guess.
It certainly does look like it was reversed. I agree with you.
I can get clarification on that from the architect.
Yeah, I think we would want to know, and then we'd obviously want to make sure that anything that's happening there, we wouldn't be spraying or creating some sort of a chemical issue outside of that tunnel, right on that sidewalk or by the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that's not the intent. They would not have that open when the car wash was in operation. But I will get clarification. And Tricia mentioned the sound study. And usually the worst case scenario is right outside those blowers. So that would be at the end of the tunnel. So the way this site is situated, we kind of did the best we could to have those blowers at away from residential, away from that neighboring bank. It's kind of pointing out towards the intersection. So that was a way to dampen sound issues as much as possible.
Strong's back. If this is the side, if this is what faces the road, you enter here and you go out here. The blowers are right there, so this seat A701, the drawing is backwards. On the top, right?
I think in the future with revised plans, we'll, instead of naming it equipment elevation, we'll have them change it to like east elevation or west elevation so that we can know which side we're looking at.
Yeah,
and make sure it's
that would-
accurate.
That would be better, yeah.
You can also ask for some operational help on how those doors get opened, why they get opened. Is it normal operation? Is it just during downtime when they're cleaning it? Those are fair questions too.
That's a good idea. Good catch.
Any
Yeah, I will
other-
say that's the first time I've got that question, so it's a good one.
Any other questions? In terms of the entry and exit, the time it takes for one of the vehicles to progress through the tunnel wash?
You know, they have not provided me with a time that it makes it through the tunnel. I could tell you that it's less than 5 minutes, just based on the math of how much they can get done in a day.
I'll help you with that. That changes. They speed it up and slow it down based on
volume.
volume.
Okay. Now, is there more than one car in the tunnel at a time?
Yep, they can run bumper to bumper pretty much in the tunnel.
Okay. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, this is a public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Jason to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Gentlemen, have any comments? Okay.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Jason to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, we've gone over the comments offered by staff, some detail that was needs to be had as well in terms of some of the graphics, and we have a recommendation for tabling action to fine-tune the site. Is there a desire to do that, or is there some, is it good as it is?
I think it would be nice to get a few of these items cleaned up. I would certainly want to know operationally how the tunnel works, where those doors are, what is happening, if they're strictly maintenance or if they choose to be open. I would be concerned that we would see stacking onto Westtown, which obviously is not desired in that situation. So it would be nice to see if that could be cleaned up a little. Only from my side of things, I'd sure like it if the dumpster could get moved closer to the north side, just because that's the entry drive in. And visually, I think it would look nicer if the dumpster weren't the first thing you see when you pull in that. But I understand they have to do some things operationally, and that may be their best spot. They also, I think in my mind, need to provide parking for the employees, if that is in case where they go in front of the vacuum or in the vacuum bays. We would probably want to have that indicated on the plan somewhere, so that way we know that that's the intention and that those may not be used. But it just seems like there's a few things that just need to be cleaned up. Otherwise, from positive side, I like the glass along Wilson, and I think that's really neat. The building fits with, I think, where it's going. So I'm not opposed to it. There's some things that would be cleaned up.
I tend to agree with what Jason said. The one thing, I mean, ideally, if we get a little bit more clarity on the noise levels from the vacuums to that nearest building, just because I know I get what you're saying about like I saw the 50 feet from an hour truck, but like the buildings are still like 400 feet away from Wilson, so it's really more comparable at 50 feet to 55-mile-an-hour truck going down Westtown Drive. So there's just like a little bit of making sure that the noise won't be too, I guess, encumbering for those who live in those apartment buildings, and getting a better feel for what that noise level will be, specifically where that's at. Because I know that was a little bit closer in distance too. So that's something that just
Well, it's kind of tough with sound studies though, because they have to find an existing site.
right.
So it's not, we're going to get the exact same distances. I don't know if the sound study was provided to everyone. They kind of give some ranges of distances.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to just get a little better feel for that, just with the proximity to those apartment buildings for me. And maybe that's just something that I have to be talked through a little more, but that's something in my mind that is out there. And then just all of the items, again, whenever we see like a relatively long list, we just like to see some more of that checked off before we push it forward through the process.
I'd have to say that noise is probably my least concern here because of where it's at. And also the vacuums are a centralized vacuum system, and all you hear is sucking. You don't hear the vacuum itself. I know that from going to Mr. Car Wash. I don't agree with the young lady on not letting people in after the car wash because they might use the vacuums. I'm a member of Mr. Car Wash, and the three I use, you can get to the vacuums without even going through the car wash. And I don't know if that's a problem or not. I also know the employees park in the vacuum spots when there's more there.
Well, I'm not saying it's not done, just Tidal Wave doesn't do it that way specifically.
I would recommend, I would recommend that north exit be expanded to be an entrance and exit, but that's just me, and the rest of the commission can do as they do it. There's a lot that needs to be worked out on this. I have no problem with it being a car wash at all. So, I mean, I think there's some tweaks that could happen that would make all of us more comfortable.
Mr. Chairman, maybe to add to help you guys out, when the original plan came in for site plan review, there was a full service driveway on it. So, at one point in time, they thought that was appropriate on this site. So I think that's an important thing for you guys to get across to them, whether you're comfortable with what they're proposing or whether you want an entry also, because they'll need to know that if they come back.
Okay. Scott, any?
I generally agree with what everybody else has said. I think two-way entry and exit would be beneficial. Parking, of course, has already been talked about, and of course the operational questions that are still pending. Like others have said, I think it's generally a good use for that location. Just need a couple of details buttoned up and clarified.
Thank you. Pat, any?
No other comments. Everybody's already said everything.
All right. Mark?
Generally in favor of the project. I go through the Standale Auto Wash quite a bit, and they only have 3 employees at the most there. I understand Mr. Car Wash, people don't touch your car anymore, so it's basically all automatic, so the employees is really not a concern. I do believe the plan needs to be firmed up, a little bit more clarification, so I would be in favor of tabling it at this point.
Joe?
Yeah, I think a recommendation to table is probably a good idea, get some of these things taken care of.
Okay. What I'd offer on it, I'm in agreement as far as some of the detail that's been called out. I'm uncertain, however, on the sufficiency of stacking to be able to be reassured that it won't back out into the private drive. It looks like they've got that capacity for the 17. I'm not sure how that could be improved upon given the constraints of the site. So, and that's been called out as one of the concerns. I'm not sure how that could be accomplished, but I guess that's where that's left up to the project engineer to be able to take a look at that and see how that could be improved.
I just have one comment before you make your motion in terms of direction for the applicant. Steve, you mentioned that you would like to have a better comfort level with the noise. Would you suggest having them find a site that was more comparable to kind of the variables that we have at this site versus like the one that they provided? I looked at that site just on Google Maps, and it's kind of in a rural area, so it doesn't have the same variables. So I get what you're saying, and I just wanted to clarify if that's the direction that you'd like to give the applicant.
If possible, that would be extremely helpful.
Okay, being point at this point, do we want to, anyone have a motion to offer for the project at hand?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion on case number 22-016, 248 Wilson Avenue Northwest Tidal Wave Auto Spa. I make a motion to table the final area site plan for the proposed Tidal Wave Car Wash and Auto Spa facility located at 248 Wilson Avenue Northwest based on the following findings. Site design brings the potential for vehicle stacking on the West Elm Drive. Number 2, designs of driveways is not conducive for ingress of waste hauling trucks with 15-foot width exits only. Number 3, ADA access for car wash users may not be adequate. Number 4, parking for employees may not be adequate. Number 5, plan inadequacies outlined by the city manager's report dated 6/30/22. Number 6, concerns about noise to the neighbors, and we would like to see a better depiction of what that would be.
You have a motion?
Second.
Support by Scott. Any other comments? There being none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kayleigh.
All right, next project is case number 22-005, final area site plan. Tricia, if you could introduce the project, please.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to remove from the table the final area site plan for case 22-005 for review.
Second.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Scott, to remove this project from the table. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thanks. And Tricia.
Thank you. So this, as you mentioned, this item was on the table, or it was tabled at the April 20th Planning Commission meeting for Heartland Dental, and this is just up the street from the site we were just looking at, within the same PUD. And so the action requested by the Planning Commission is to review the final area site plan. This is a revised site plan for now a 4,200 square foot dental office, and to grant approval with or without conditions, tabling, or denial of the request. The property address is 348 Wilson, and the lot size is approximately 1 acre. It's within the Westtown CPUD. Future land use is mixed use with a neighborhood node, a community character designation, and this is lot C3 of the Westtown CPUD on the east side of Wilson Avenue between Westtown Service Drive and Lake Michigan Drive. And I believe we have Alejandro Fernandez with Stonefield Engineering with us tonight. So just to refresh your memory of which lot this is lot C3 of the Westtown CPUD. And oops, this is between Chick-fil-A and Culver's. So proposed improvements, there are just a few minor changes with this revised site plan that I'm going to go through quickly with you. So the first plan showed 4,230 square feet for the building size. This one has shrunk down just a tiny bit, and it is 4,200 square feet, 10 patient rooms, 2 treatment rooms, 31 standard size parking spaces, previously 37. So they've removed a few to accommodate some of our requests from the last meeting. They're showing 1 loading space, and they've updated the location for this loading space. They have a cross-access with the existing Culver's restaurant. They're proposing site lighting. This has been updated based on our comments from the last meeting. Landscaping, a ground mount sign, masonry dumpster enclosure, which has also been relocated. And just to give you an idea of, oops, sorry, this mouse is very sensitive. So at the last meeting, we recommended that the Planning Commission table this item based on just a number of site design elements that we felt should be revised in order to avoid any conflicts on the site with cross-access and any trash hauling trucks or loading trucks that are making deliveries. And so we feel like the site plan revisions are sufficient and meet our concerns and the requests that we've made for changes. So one of the biggest things here is that they move the building to be more in line with the existing buildings that are out there. So we're talking about Chick-fil-A and Culver's that are set back roughly 30-something feet from the Wilson Avenue right-of-way. And so the previous site plan did not show any lighting on this side of the building, so they've added some wall pack lighting. They've moved the dumpster enclosure. Previously, the dumpster enclosure was down here, and we had some concerns with cross-access, having conflicts with garbage trucks. And so they've also created a loading zone that is closer to where the building is and where the loading and unloading would take place from delivery trucks or trucks that are taking items away from the site. Previously, it was proposed right here, and this site also wasn't really all that suitable because it had the potential for conflicts with people using that cross-access easement. And so they've rearranged their parking areas slightly, and they've addressed our concerns with the new site plan. I have a list in my report named other items, and there's just 2 items on here that are minor that should still be addressed. The zoning designation on the map on the cover sheet it's actually the 4290 Lake Michigan Drive, one of Stonefield's sites. So that should be called out as C1. And then the second thing is that they're proposing a ground mount sign, and the square footage does not include the masonry base as part of the total square footage calculation. And so as it is, the applicant would be asking for a 60 square foot ground mount sign. So if it's their intent to ask for a larger ground mount sign, then the applicant should clarify this and ask for this as a PUD benefit. That's one of the main things that people ask for when it comes to a PUD benefit, particularly with commercial developments. So 60 square foot is the desired size, okay. But if it's not, then the calculation should include the masonry base. That's just a technical ordinance thing. And so I am making a recommendation for the Planning Commission to approve the revised site plan for Heartland Dental. And I won't go all through these items because I assume that whoever makes the motion will read them into the record.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Any questions? All right, turn it over to City Engineer Scott Connors.
So our memo is really 3 parts there. You'll see the original memo was written April 15th, 7th, and I don't believe it went back to the Planning Commission for that one because none of the items were addressed. But then for June 30th, you can see that most of the items are taken care of. There's just a few left. You know, one issue that we've talked a little bit about is access. Well, there is good access here to this ring road, but how is that maintained? And that wasn't a big issue when this original development started, but then the apartments sold. And I'm starting to get a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling. We just want to confirm that there's somebody responsible for the road. The plowing will become pretty obvious, but the road and for the storm sewer. So it's not just left behind in disrepair 10 or 15 years from now. So that's got to be written down somewhere, and we'd like to just confirm that and make sure that the apartment complex is still responsible for those things. I think that's the way that's going to work out, but we want to make sure. There's also a note on there about the need to get to a power pole that's on the Chick-fil-A site to the north. We've certainly provided ample warning there. If they trespass onto that site without approval, that's on the contractor because we've told them 3 times. And then lastly, you can see the detail for the DDA sidewalk. And again, we want to make sure that that's on the plan because if it's not, the folks that are doing the concrete are more than likely to just make it 3 by 3 and call it good. And we've got a few of those out there. So that's it for us.
Comments or questions for Scott? Scott, with regard to that, you raised a good point in terms of the ongoing maintenance. Was that something captured in the original PUD that is already in writing?
I sure hope so, but there were a lot of pledges and promises made on that one, and then the apartments sold almost about a year after they were built. So we need to follow up and be sure on that. And I think all these businesses would want to know that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. At this point, applicant, do you have anything to offer? Any additional comments on the project?
We do. I'll come up and Andrew, the smarter of the two, will follow.
Okay.
But
Hit that middle button, please.
Very nice.
Thank you.
My name is Max Nathan. I am with the developer of the property, and appreciate you guys hanging around and hearing us for this item and then also the next item that we're going to have with you. Just to address the comment on the maintenance of the ring road, which I know we had previously had a discussion about. So we have 2 reciprocal easement agreements. I can forward them over to you. The maintenance of the stormwater as well as the maintenance of the ring road itself are a part of the ownership of the apartment development. So that is in perpetuity, no matter who the owner is. So that is written somewhere. We have the agreements. I'm happy to send them over and highlight exactly where they're listed in there. So hope you guys appreciate the changes that we made to the plans based on our ongoing communications with you, and appreciate your time. And hopefully we can get this all taken care of and build you some good new buildings in the community. We've worked here before, and we look forward to continue working with you guys in the future. So appreciate your time very much, and I'll pass things off to Alejandro.
Hello. Well, it was basically all summarized by Tricia, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys have in regards to any of the comments that we addressed.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for the applicant? That's a good thing. Yeah, from my standpoint, the plan, as evidenced by the recommendations from staff, is really taken to heart what was brought up, and it looks like some good changes, and it'll be a good fit for the area.
Looking for a motion?
Yes.
All right, I will make a motion for case 22-005 to approve the final area site plan for the 4,200 square foot dental office and related site improvements in accordance with the plan last revision dated 6/14/2022, located at 348 Wilson Avenue Northwest, Lot 3 of the Westtown CPUD, subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 6/30/2022. The applicant shall revise plans to address the other items listed in this report prior to the issuance of any building permit. The property owner shall work with the Standale Downtown Development Authority as it relates to any streetscape or landscape improvements proposed within the Wilson Avenue right-of-way adjacent to the subject lot site. Any changes to the approved landscape plan shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to building occupancy. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. And the applicant may be required to provide a financial guarantee in the form of a letter of cash or cash escrow deposit to ensure the quality completion of site-related items such as landscaping at the time of building permit issuance.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Steve, supported by Tyler, to conditionally approve the request at hand. Are there any comments, questions? There being none, all those in favor indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, man.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're all set on that one. All right. Next item is case number 21-035, change to approved site plan, 4290 Lake Michigan Drive. Tricia.
Thanks for getting my name right this time, Terry.
You're welcome.
So you may remember, however far back it was in January when this site plan came before you for approval. They also asked for a rezone, and it was approved. The site plan was also approved. But the applicant ran into some issues, which I'll go into after I give you the property summary for the record. And they're proposing to make a change. So the action required by the Planning Commission is to review the proposed change in a previously approved site plan at 4290 Lake Michigan Drive for WellNow Urgent Care, and to approve with conditions, or deny or table the request. This is a carryover, so it's not a rezone request, it's a change to an approved site plan. The zoning district is now C1, neighborhood commercial, it's located on the south side of Lake Michigan Drive between Cummings Avenue and Westtown Service Drive. And we have the same folks from Stonefield Engineering with us again. So there's a section in the site plan review section of the zoning ordinance that allows minor changes to an approved site plan to be approved administratively if it meets any of these 5 criteria. I thought maybe we'd be able to approve it administratively under number 5, but I think that would probably be a stretch. The city and, other government agencies, namely Eagle, isn't requiring the change to the site plan, but rather the applicant is changing the site plan to reduce the amount of impact that they would have on the wetlands, and they would have to work through Eagle in order to do it on as proposed originally. And so this section requires that the Planning Commission review the change to the approved site plan. And it's pretty long, and it basically just says that the Planning Commission needs to review it, and it must be an agreement between the Planning Commission and the applicant that the change is doable. And so just a quick overview of the site plan change here. So this was the original site plan. The main change is the driveway here would have impacted this regulated wetland that was here. I think from the get-go, we knew that this wetland was regulated because, staff had worked with the folks who developed Westtown, and everything on this side is part of that larger wetland system. And so the major change is that in order to avoid these wetlands and avoid having to go through Eagle and, work to get the wetlands permit and potentially have to mitigate wetlands elsewhere in Michigan, the change was proposed to move this driveway, still proposed as a full service driveway. And the other changes were just made as sort of a cascade effect of having to move that driveway. So just in going through detail all of the changes that would have to happen as a result of this driveway moving over to the east side of the site. The cross-access driveway, so this is the main thing, as I mentioned, moving to the east side of the site. They had to rearrange their parking just slightly, and they reduced it from 37 spaces to 34 spaces, which, in my opinion, is a bonus because I felt like the site was overparked to begin with. Only 18 are required, so the reduction in number of parking spaces is a good thing. They've also relocated their dumpster so that they have space for where this driveway has movement. They've also relocated their loading space to this spot right here, which has affected a couple of the parking spaces. They're also proposing to add pervious pavers to these 7 parking spaces here. And that's a change that's not necessarily required to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, but it's a positive change in my opinion. They've also, as a result of moving the driveway, they had to move the location of these 2 light poles, and they've also shifted the location of a couple of trees. Not shown on this plan is the fire suppression line that would have to be moved to follow the path of the relocated driveway. And so that's the summary of the changes. I'm not going to go into a whole lot more depth because you've already approved this site plan, and so I'm asking that the Planning Commission approve the changes to a previously approved site plan and subject to some modified conditions. Originally, I had some conditions that aligned with the previous approval, but I added just as a thing that these 2 conditions weren't on here before, but just as a standard, I've been adding these to most site plan approvals to avoid issues down the road. So the 2 things that I've added are just that if any changes are proposed to the approved landscape plan, that the applicant shall work with staff for review and approval of a revised landscape plan. Sometimes people get going on their site landscaping and realize that they might need to make some changes once they're on the ground and the building's built. So we'd like the ability to be able to review and approve those plans. And then the second one being that the applicant may be required to provide a financial guarantee to ensure quality completion of required exterior site items. And that's if building occupancy is requested before all these items are completed, like parking lot striping, landscaping, lighting, those kind of things. Because we run into that depending on when a site is, you know, what time of year it is when a building is built and when they want occupancy. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Tricia? Scott?
So similar to the last project, I gave you last time's memo so that we could then essentially cross out the stuff that's been taken care of and highlight the stuff that hasn't. So right off the bat, I think talking about the cross-access easement out front, we still want to make sure that that gets done before the building permit's issued. We've had a few sites along this road that didn't do that. And I don't know if there was just good intentions that we'll just do it later if you need it or something, but we didn't get them and we'll never get them without having them come in for a site plan, because it'll end up with us having to go to court, get attorneys and all that. So we need to get those things up front, so that's still important. Also, the detail about the sidewalk still doesn't show all the details with the brushing and the tooling. We want to make sure that gets on there again. And there's a little bit of a change to the stormwater design now. I think through the stormwater permit process, they were proposing to get rid of the stormwater quality unit that was there and do some more low-impact development things. And I think you see that with the pavers. You can also see there's a difference where there's like a stone that's shown along the south side of the pavers and along the west side of that new green access road. So those are changes that they'll have to work out through the stormwater permit. That'll be something that Rachel will review, and I don't want to make any promises that they aren't going to need the stormwater quality unit, because sometimes I get scolded for not being tough enough on those things. So let's see how that works out. But for the most part, I think the change is a good one.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions for Scott? Gentlemen?
Hello again. Regarding stormwater, we did make some changes. We removed the water quality, the mechanical unit, and we did provide 2 basins above ground, which meet Algro standards. We used their spreadsheets and everything to meet and exceed the required volume. Other than that, this was basically a relocation of the driveway due to the remapping of the existing wetlands on site. But that's all I have, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Discussion?
We mentioned that this might happen when we approved it last time, that there could be a change because of not knowing what was there, so this is no shock.
Ready for a motion?
Yes.
Wonderful. For case 21-035, I will make a motion to approve the changes to the 1/19/22 approved site plan for the medical office WellNow urgent care located at 4290 Lake Michigan Drive as summarized in the list below, subject to the following modified conditions. Full movement driveway to the south has been shifted from the west to the east side of the property. The number of proposed parking spaces has been reduced from 37 spaces to 34 spaces. Per ordinance, there are 18 parking spaces required per code. The dumpster has been shifted from the east side of the property to the west side to avoid conflict with the proposed full movement driveway. Pervious pavers have been added to the rear 6 parking spaces. Fire suppression line has been moved to follow the path of the proposed driveway. 2 area lights in the rear of the site have been moved to provide lighting along the proposed driveway. 2 trees have been shifted to accommodate the proposed driveway. Conditions, the applicant shall address all items outlined in the city engineer's report dated 6/30/2022. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended revisions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. If any changes are proposed to the approved landscape plan, the applicant shall work with staff on review and approval of a revised landscape plan. and the applicant may be required to provide a financial guarantee to ensure quality completion of required exterior site items if building occupancy is requested before all exterior site items are complete.
Got a motion?
Support.
Support. Motion by Steve, supported by Tyler to conditionally approve the request as submitted. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We all set for the night?
Yeah, I could give you a whole bunch of updates, but I'm sure you're ready to leave. We do have a, big agenda for the next meeting, with the proposed Vista 45, item on the agenda, so,
Well, one thing, we had the opportunity to meet at the site for the project in Greenridge area.
yep.
And we were not able to field a quorum, so it was not an official meeting. And so what we indicated to the, especially the neighbors that showed up, there was quite a few of them that did show up for that meeting, that if there's any discussion about that notice would be given beforehand, and they'd have an opportunity to be able to listen to that if they'd like. And so as we look at next couple of agendas, are we gonna have a separate time set aside to talk about that, or are we gonna defer that discussion until the project comes back to the commission?
That's a good question, Terry. I feel like we haven't had a whole lot of correspondence with the applicant over the last couple weeks since we had the site visit, but we did still want to have that discussion with the planning commission and the applicant and the neighbors. So, you know, I think if it would work for the planning commission, we might be able to schedule something from like 5 to 6:30 to have sort of a special work session type thing, which is what we originally planned to do. So I can schedule that for the 20th, if that would work for everybody.
It's fine with me, I'm on vacation, so,
Okay.
just letting you know.
Otherwise, I can do it for sometime in April, or August. It's been a long day.
All in favor, say aye.
Say yes.
So I can throw it out there for the 20th between 5 and 6:30. We don't have a zoning ordinance subcommittee meeting on that day, so we can, I'll just see who's available.
That sounds okay with me.
Okay.
Yep, cool.
All right, do that then? Okay.
I guess I'll share a piece of gossip I heard today is Jack Keller Ford was sold to a mega dealership out of Detroit, and that's all I know.
Kevin Rankin.
Okay.
All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Sounds good. Thank you all.